Hey all, I'm Gabby and I'm a wet and wet oil painter, and today I'm going to be painting Alla Prima on Mars. Well, sort of. We're going to pretend we're on Mars and we're going to paint. So let me show you what I have on my palette. This is white, lemon yellow, this is like a darker cad yellow, yellow orange, vermilion, cad red. This is a scarlet, this one is also a scarlet, and then this is ultramarine blue. Now, one thing all these colors have in common is they're very opaque. Now, we have my canvas here, and though I'm a wet and wet oil painter, I'm not quite wet and wet oil painting because this canvas is bone dry. Now, I remember hearing a long time ago a very famous painter saying, don't set the sky on fire. Well, today we're going to set the whole thing on fire. So let's get started. So I'm going to take a regular flat brush. Maybe not this one. Oh, we'll try this one. Okay. And I'm going to start with my lemon yellow. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of white and I'm going to sort of layer it into this here. I just want to have a spot that's a little bit lighter. Okay, so now I'm going to take that cad yellow and that's one of my favorite colors actually. It's just a really fun color to play around with. And I'm just doing my flip-flop, fishy kind of hand type of movement. And then we're going to keep on working our way out. And as we work our way out, we're going to get darker. So this is almost like wet and wet oil painting with this being the paint that we lay down first. I'm going to take a little bit of Gamsol just to kind of get some of this paint to move a little bit better. And especially as I start to actually blend these in together, I'll have a little bit more Gamsol involved. Gamsol is a paint thinner. Only paint thinner that I'll use is Gamsol. And I do that because it doesn't stink and it's not super flammable. And it's also made by the Gambling Company, and I always try to support businesses from my homeland. So I'm going to move on I'm going to pass the vermilion for a second, and I'm going to go to this cad red, because this cad red is a little bit lighter than the vermilion, actually. And I believe this vermilion that I'm using is actually Grumbacher. And it's a bit more of an oily paint, so it'll move around a little better. Now, as for brands of paint, I have probably, not every single one, but almost every single one of these piles of paint that I have here. They are all different brands. Up in the sky, I like to have more of the X, because then I can kind of blend it and give it texture. On the ground, I want it to look more sort of leveled out. So I do a lot more of this straight back and forth. Okay, so before we go any further, I'm going to take a, reach it, I'm going to use a goat hair brush. So it's just a soft blender brush if you have one of those. Otherwise, these natural goat hair brushes are great. And I'm going to start in this sort of light area. And I'm not making X motions, I'm making sort of gentle circular motions. I'm going to bring a little bit of this darker color back down into there to sort of give it some texture. These blender type brushes are really good for just sort of softening things up and kind of bringing them together. And I like to use these versus using like a 2-inch brush when I'm doing the blending, because, you know, if you do like the back and forth, I always seem to get a lot of lines, and it's probably because I paint a little bit wetter than the average person. So I prefer to not have all those lines all over my pictures. And I'm going to be adding some darker colors to the corners, but if I can get a little bit of paint over onto this drier stuff, when I bring in the other paint, it'll be a lot easier to do. Okay, we're going to go back to our brush that we were using before. And I'm going to take a little bit of the scarlet. And what I am missing off of here is a little bit of alizarin crimson. So these are just crimson, but they're more opaque. I will probably put a little bit of alizarin crimson on. We'll use that a little bit later. But like I said before, I want to have stuff that's more opaque. And I have a few of these goat brushes sort of going, so I will probably interchange them as I go. The thing about those is if you use them and then you clean them, not only do you have to really knock off of the paint, you also need to physically dry them because they really soak up moisture. So if I want to clean them in the midst of this, I will have to clean them and dry them. Let's see. What I didn't really talk about before is why I paint on these flat canvases, and I'll do a video later where I talk about them, but basically I do this because it saves a lot of space versus like the canvas that's stretched on stretchers. Okay, so now I have all that sort of on, and I'm just going to take my goat brush again. Now if the paint is sort of more liquidy, I'll start to actually get marks in here from this brush itself. And it's a little bit more swampy down here, but I sort of did that on purpose. All right. Now, what I think before we actually move on, I'm going to clean my brush. Okay, I got my brush cleaned, and I'm going to grab a little bit more yellow, and I'm going to bring it down a little bit further. One thing about goat brushes is they shed a lot, especially the cheaper ones. So if you ever do get them, they're wonderful. They're for watercolor, but I use them for oil painting. If you ever do get them, if you can get the ones that cost a little bit more, you'll end up with a lot less shedding hairs. no matter what kind of brushes you're using, especially after you're like done blending in the sky, it never hurts to kind of take a look at your picture from sort of different angles, just to make sure that you get the hairs off, because if they dry on there, then you'll end up seeing them as the paint sort of sucks itself down to the canvas. And it'll be really hard to get that mark out. Okay, excellent. So now we have this fire sky, and we are going to take a palette knife, any shape, size, whatever's fine, whatever you want to use if you're following along. And I'm gonna grab some paint. Now the paint that I'm grabbing is this Scarlet, and this Scarlet is a really cheap paint, so it's like, it's super soupy. So I'm gonna grab some of this other Scarlet that I have here because it's like way thicker, sort of mix them, but I don't want to mix them too much, because just like anything, the less you mix them, the more variation you get in your color as you paint. So I'm gonna make some sort of deserty looking rock structures. And you'll see as I go through this process that I'm not filling this in completely, because I'm going to be using some of that lightness from the sky in my mountains. Now as this side is the back side, I'm filling it in more versus leaving in more of those bigger gaps. I'm going to grab some of that alizarin crimson. And this one is a Grumbacher's Academy, and so it is also a little bit liquidy. This other crimson that I used that was really thick was this brand. It's called Reeves, and surprisingly, for a cheap paint, although I don't think you can buy it in big tubes, you only buy it in sets. For cheaper paint, it's really thick. It's got a lot of body to it, and a lot of other good stuff, so I really like it. But I'm going to mix a little bit of that with the alizarin crimson. It's going to bring it a little bit deeper. And if you're ever doing this, you sort of have to decide if you're going to have mountains going two directions. Because you usually do. You have to decide sort of where that meeting point is. Something like that. Looks good. All right. So I'm going to take another goat brush, and I've already started using this one. And I'm going to just sort of pat my way down. And then I'm going to lift and just sort of soften this. And then sort of blend it into the landscape. There we go. Excellent. So now what we need is anything that light hits, we got to have some shadows to go along with it. And that's what that ultramarine blue is for. So we're going to swing some of that in. And then I am going to do some shadows back over on this other side too. But I bring them down so they sort of seem to hit some other pieces behind. So you'll see that I'm not stretching the leg out on this side because it's essentially being blocked by this other piece. There we go. And then I think over here, because I have sort of legs that come out this way for this lighter stuff, I'm going to have the shadow of them back on the other side. Now, I want to sort of create this look of kind of little rocks, and by doing that I'm going to, or to do that, I'm going to create the shadows of the rocks essentially. So I'm going to take some of that ultramarine blue, and I'm not putting much on my knife, and I'm kind of getting it, instead of putting a roll of it, I'm sort of putting it flat on the back of the knife, okay? And I am going to put my knife flat against the canvas, and I'm going to slide it. Good. Okay, so I'm going to make one more rock structure, and then I'm going to sort of make some ground structures. So I'll take some more of that crimson, and I'm going to mix a little bit of the vermilion that I still have on my palette here, and make this guy. And then I'm going to have this one just have a much smaller sort of back piece to it. Now you can do these however you want, wherever you want them, essentially. I'm going to give this little arm here a little bit of a shadow too. There we go. Excellent. So I'm going to give this one a little bit of light since the other one has the light in it. So I'll take a little bit of that cad yellow. And sometimes when I do this too, by the way, I will I'll do like the orange first, and then I'll do like the yellow, so that it sort of has this gradual coming to light versus just being like bang and then it's like lighter. Cover up a little bit of that because it was a little bit too much of a shock to the eye. There we go. One really important thing when you're painting is to step back from your paint and from your piece and to see it from a distance, because you will see things in your pictures that you don't see up close. It'll give you a whole different perspective. I like to think of it as a more sympathetic perspective when you're further away. Okay, so now we're going to put some stuff on the ground. I'm going to use some of this alizarin crimson, and I'm going to mix it with the vermilion that I have left over. And I'm just going to kind of slide across the ground like this, and I'm just very gently sort of wiggling it. And you'll see that it's not straight. I definitely don't want it to be straight. This is going to be one of the best ways that we're going to put some depth into this, because we're painting on another planet today. We're not going to have any vegetation. There, we'll start with those. Okay, so now we're going to take a brush, and I'm just going to use the same one I used when I was doing this to begin with. And I'm going to grab these and I'm going to pull them backwards. Now, every horizontal line that you put in a picture creates depth. Every one of them. So the more horizontal lines you can work into your picture, the better. I'm going to sort of cover that part up. Okay, so now we have our sort of little divots in the ground, and they'll make sense in a second here. I'm going to use that ultramarine blue on my knife, and just not a lot of it. Oh, you know what, actually, I'm not going to do it with my knife. We're going to do this with a brush. So I have another flat, I don't know, it's like a 1/2 inch brush. And technically this is a bright because it has shorter bristles. Okay, so we're going to start putting in some shadows. So we want to think of our light as coming from that direction. And you'll see through this process some of these that I put in are much bigger than other ones, because it really just depends on what sort of shadowing I want to have. So now, on this adjacent side, we're going to take that same brush we've been using, and we're going to do some yellow, but just sort of where we're going to have ridges that look like they're sort of being hit by the sun. Okay? Let's do a little bit back here too. And if you're doing this, you know, if you make your little swoops shorter back here and bigger up here, it'll give it that more forward appearance. Now, because we put in that really light stuff, now from over here we're going to have sort of light stuff but not nearly as light. I'm going to drop some shadows in, but I'm going to make these just vertical. So again, that they're looking like they're being covered up by the pieces that are sort of sliding in front of them. This one, I'm going to put just a little piece in, and then I'm going to slide a little bit more yellow here. Yeah, so it's just like a little rock. I sort of discovered this concept of putting in these, you know, depressions in the ground, these short little ones, on accident. But it's been really fun ever since I sort of discovered it, because I think it's just been, it's a really neat effect. Okay, I'm going to take some more red, and I'm going to just use my brush, and I'm going to make another sort of level up here, but further back. And then again, I'm sort of dragging it backwards. Think horizontal lines. We'll give these a little bit of shadows here too. Very neat. I think over here, because we have this sort of marking down, I'm going to grab some of this, and I'm just going to swing some of these little bits over. And you can do this too, where basically you just grab dark and you have it swing over, and then you can just grab a brush and bring some lines this direction. So sort of the trick to this is having lines that are horizontal and vertical. It gives you that sort of dip, that drop in the picture. Let's see, is there anything else that we want to do with this? I think I see one thing. So I'm going to take this back here. And so I'm sort of wiggling back and forth. And now that that sort of blue and the red are sort of coming together with that, it gives it kind of more of a deserty sort of look. Now by having it like a deep red here and then having it fade out, especially like up on this higher edge, it creates it like there's rocks in front of it, creating a little bit of a shadow, but not too much of a shadow. Let's see. So I'm going to step back from it a little bit and try to see if there's anything I feel like really needs to be fixed. So in general, like when you work on a picture, you want to work sort of from the back and work your way forward. So if you do step back, you sort of have to do it carefully. I have an idea. I'm going to take a smaller flat brush, and I'm going to take a little bit of cad yellow mixed with a little bit of lemon yellow, and I'm going to make just yeah, there we go. Now we have a little bit of light hitting that spot there. So that's it. Thanks for joining me on my destination to Mars, painting Alla Prima. I challenge you out there to try to pick a very bizarre world, a different planet, and then paint what you think it might look like on the surface. Like I said before, I left out vegetation because obviously there isn't vegetation on Mars. There. Just blended that in a little bit. So anyways, thanks for joining me on my little mission to Mars. Take the challenge, see if you can come up with something really wacky and fun. As crazy as it might sound, this is not the first time I've painted this picture. I've painted many variations of this picture, and I sell a lot of them. So it's captivating. The color is really cool. Some people think it's a little bit dark, but I actually think it's really fun. And I like to think of this as Mars. And if it were Mars, no matter how red it looks, it's probably very cold there. Anyways, guys, thanks for joining me. Come along with me on another painting sometime. Watch some of my other videos. Like, share, subscribe. That would be very helpful. I'm Gabby. Until next time, happy painting.